Your expertise, I know, is that you call it the calm parent. And look, we can talk about anxiety, what's behind this, and I guess it's contrast to be calm. It kind of seems that, it takes a lot probably to be calm as a parent. I'm wondering, also, when I think about your thesis of being a calm parent,
Mhm.
sometimes I think, well, wait a minute, are we just kind of like giving in to our children and letting them walk over us? Can you talk about what it
Yeah.
takes to be calm?
Well, it's a really good question. I mean, being a calm parent does not mean being a pushover or a doormat, although it can sound like that. Really, a calm parent is a parent in control of him or herself. All right.
Mm.
Because when you're in control of yourself, you will, first of all, feel calmer. Your children will be calmer and things will go better. All right. But what does it take to do that? It sounds easy, but it isn't.
Mm.
And what is all of this anxiety about? So let me just start, and you can interrupt me at any point, but I will say that we are inherently anxious when it comes to our kids because we love and we care about them. It is the most natural and normal thing, and it's automatic. We're symbiotic. There's just no way around it. And it's also natural to manage our anxiety by either giving into it because we can't handle it and by screaming and yelling and falling apart, or by just giving up and checking out, right? But of course, a better way is to really see your anxiety as an opportunity to grow and to mature, which is really, I always think, this is the gift parenting gives us. This is the gift our kids give us because it helps us to keep growing. As I
I
say,
know.
yeah,
I want to just, if I may, just ask to pick up on that matter of growing. Knowing you have this anxiety, but you've also referenced the family as a, kind of an emotional unit,
right.
and I want to know if with our anxiety and trying to learn from it,
Mhm.
are we passing that off, and how do we know if we're passing that off to our children?
Anxiety is highly contagious, and it's so is calm, but anxiety is highly contagious because we live in a system, right? That's a family system. So what affects one affects the other. So as you see, we're always sort of, sensing, feeling our kids' anxiety, they're feeling ours, we're tracking each other. It's happening all the time, right? That's the system. That's why it's part of that. But what we have to do is learn how to tolerate the discomfort that we feel when we're anxious, because most of the time we automatically feel that and then we do something to try to manage that anxiety. So we tell our kids what to do, or we start functioning for them, or we start yelling. Those are all ways that we're trying to manage what we're feeling. Okay, but they just don't work and they create more anxiety. So what I mean to say that we have to grow through this is to learn to sit with those feelings, okay, rather than jump on somebody else's back, which is essentially when we're screaming and yelling at our kids, what we're really saying is calm me down because I don't know how to calm down unless you do what I need you to do, okay? So now we've put our 3-year-old or our 10-year-old or our 15-year-old or even our 40-year-old in charge of our emotional responses, because I don't know how to calm down unless you do what makes me feel calmer so that I feel more valid as a parent or I feel approved of, whatever it is, right? And so that's sort of what typically happens, right? Which we can see doesn't work so well.
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of us would say on the surface, yes, being a calm parent is the right way to go. But we want our children to do what we know is right for them.
Right.
Well, I know that the children, of course, they seem to pick up the tone in the household and our tone. Is there a way to be calm without our children knowing that we might be anxious, or do they always pick up on our anxiety?
I think we always pick up, we're sensory organisms. So I think we're always picking up on that. But I think for the parent, I think it's frustrating. Well, I'm supposed to be calm. Well, how am I supposed to do that? I have all of this stuff going on. I'm worried about my kids. I think it takes challenging. There's a number of things, but the one I'm picking up on today is challenging the message that has really been handed down to parents, I think, through culture, through our own families. And that message is, you are responsible, you, the parent, are responsible for your kids' behaviors, feelings, thoughts, and their ultimate outcome. What happens is a reflection of me. Okay, so if we're carrying that belief, which is really a myth, but it is what is handed down. And if we are feeling that responsibility, it's going to be very hard to be calm. And then it would make sense why we're on their back. Okay, I need to get you to be how I need you to be so that I'm valid, so I look okay, so that I haven't failed as a parent, the most important thing there is, right? And so that is, a belief. And I think we have to check into how much we carry that belief. And is there a way to challenge that? Is it possible, humanly possible, to be responsible for our children's outcome? We certainly contribute, right? But we play 50%, shall we say, and then the other person, the child, whoever it is, has free will. They have their own mind, okay, and they have their own things. That is not to say that we don't play a part, okay.
Well, you say that they have their own will, and certainly, I see that too in the family I grew up in, and it was a large family. But you wonder if the anxiety that's in our parents, no matter if they show it or if they try to hide it, do we have that too? Is there a biological connection? Is there does anxiety and the feelings we have transfer just naturally?
It does. It does. I mean, first of all, to recognize some of the signs of anxiety in our children can be anything. I'm sure them are, they can be irritable or angry or clingy or crying or a lot of emotional outbursts or withdrawn or difficulty concentrating or poor sleeping, lots of things, right? But however, anxiety, as we said, is in the system and it's highly contagious. So if you notice their behaviors, those are really markers of their anxiety. And since we're in a system, you want to notice what you do next when you see their anxiety. Do you start worrying more? Do you start over focusing or over functioning for them? Do you try to shape them up, as we said? But if you notice, if I'm getting anxious because I see you anxious, and now you're anxious because you're seeing I'm anxious, we have a cycle that's going. And that's the contagious part. Okay, that's what, beyond, yes, it definitely is there genetically, it's coming down, but there's a lot more to it. It's not just that, right? So, yeah, so we can go into some examples of how you handle that, when you notice their anxiety, etc. If you want me to go into that a little bit.
Well, I'm sure we'll get to some scenarios pretty soon. With that, I just want to tell our parents on the call here, you can share any questions. You can write them in the Q&A down below, and we're happy to share those questions with Debbie, and perhaps you have some situations and scenarios you would like her to help us with. And so let me just pick up on this matter, which is, a lot of parents today, at least here I am as an educator here, and I think, wow, I mean, some of these parents are really over pressuring their kids. Now, let's turn to the parent now on that matter. And how can parents know what is the right balance of expectations for their children? Are they overdoing it? Are they overstressing their children? And how can they figure that out?
Yeah, it's a hard one. It is, because there's a lot coming down that is expected of the parents too. But I think expectations need to be as realistic as possible to the actual need of that child. Oftentimes we are thinking that we're expecting something from that child, but really we're projecting our own worry, our own history, our own fear onto them. It is very difficult to say, okay, what does this child really need and what would be reasonable and a realistic expectation for them. And once you're able to more or less figure that out, it's never perfect, but what I'm saying is to be as objective as you can rather than all the emotions that make it more subjective. Then, of course, okay, I think I have a smart kid. I think that's objective, and I expect him to do well, right? But now it's a little bit more accurate to that child so that it's not feeling overstressed or pressured because it's, it's more than they can handle, or it's more what the parent is worried about and needs from that child, right? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because we're in my role, of course, we are educating children here, but more and more over the years, we've been asked, it seems, to even help and assist and support our parents, and therefore kind of like we add another hat to our role here of really guiding parents. I mean, I'll share just a recent session I had here in my office with a parent who was concerned about their child and what their direction might be. We only go to 8th grade, but how to get their children motivated. That was really the core question. And so how can we do that? And if we sit back and be calm, is that just allowing just come what may for these children, or do we need to be more directive with them?
Right. Both. I think we have to sit back and I think we have to be directive. But I'm not certain we can ever motivate another human being. I think we can get in the way of our children's motivation in different ways, but I don't think that we can. But I think we can inspire. Somehow motivate has a little bit more control to it, but we can inspire. We can lead by example. We can be a role model. We can sit down with them and find out what their goals are. I mean, depending on the age, and what's a plan for how they might get there. But it's finding out really what motivates them and how to support that. And again, inspiring is really more about being a good leader, being a good role model as a parent, and talking about your own process and your own journey and how you got to be where you are. And, a lot about having them understand you and your own history and your own journey can also be inspiring. But, in terms of motivating, we certainly can hold their feet to the fire. We can certainly have, when we go back to expectations, we can have some expectations, which is, look, I can't make you do something, but I certainly can help you I can't manage you, but I can help you manage yourself. And I'm going to hold you accountable to that, right? And so, we can have some conversations and some consequences sometimes if people aren't doing what is necessary for their own growth.
A related question, Debbie, is it's one thing to, can I get them either more motivated for a particular activity they already are pursuing?
Yeah.
But some children, I hear from parents that my child is not interested in anything yet. What can I do to turn things around?
Right. Well, sometimes depending on the age, it's not a choice that's non-negotiable. We got to try some, at a young age, let's try some different things, and then you'll get to select what most inspires you or interests you. But you do have to choose some things, even if they're not naturally interested. But again, if a child's really not interested in anything, I would want to know what's going on in the larger environment. First of all, I'd want to know what's going on. Is there some depression or some anxiety or fear, or are they rebelling against something? Or, have they just not been allowed to be bored to figure out what they want? Or have decisions been made too much for them? There's things that could get in the way. But I do think at the end of the day, to turn things around, we can expect that they try different things and then get to choose later on, because they can be exposed to a lot of things at an early age, but they need to select as they get older so that they're not overwhelmed by that. Right.
Well, let me talk a little bit about some specific behaviors in kids and maybe some attitudes and approaches that we can take as parents. I grew up in a big family. I had, there were 7 kids in our family, and this is going to date me because my, this is going to put me back in the dark ages growing up. I get it, but my mother would say, I'm going to wash out your mouth with soap if you say that again.
Yeah.
I mean, when children speak negatively,
Mm.
which is always horrifying for a parent. I mean, what do you do to turn things around? I mean, we went through a lot of soap when we grew up.
Did it work?
I think eventually it did.
Right.
We
Well,
got the message.
that's right. But it's a good point, in the days of when we used hitting or things like that, we probably got more obedience, but I'm not sure, we're now much more concerned about the emotional development. So, when we don't do those things, it's a little bit harder to have our kids turn around the way we want them to. But again, as you see, it's any of these things, I don't focus too much on how to shape up our kids as much as to look at what's going on both in the system and in ourselves and our outside stressors. So, observe. The first thing I would do is observe how you speak to them. Is how positively or negatively do you speak to them? Okay, you are a model for them. And if there is a lot of negativity, I would also want to know what might be going on between us, right? Not in you, but not in me, but between us. Okay, is if I'm very anxious about you, then I might, always be on your case or when I say over functioning, doing more for you than you can do for yourself. So am I too overbearing? Am I too underbearing? Right, in some way. Am I too involved or am I under involved? Just looking at what goes on, because usually there's something that's going on that might be creating some annoyance or anger or rebellion or resistance in the other. And once we recognize that, and if we can stay calm through it, yes, my child is feeling this way towards me, and I don't like that, but then we can come up, in other words, stay curious and collaborate and have conversation and figure out a better way, with them. Right. Understand it.
Absolutely. That's great. I know a conflict that a lot of parents feel is when should I be the stern parent? When should I, by contrast, be the friend to my child? What situations would warrant being a friend or sticking to your guns and being stern?
Right. I don't think there's an either or on that. I think they both are important. A parent should always be a parent. There's a hierarchy that's necessary, and friendly and firm and flexible and warm and engaged. But I divide it up between, we have two things that as parents, we have the personal relationship and the so-called business relationship. So the business relationship is that we have a job to do with our kids. We need to discipline, we need to guide, we need to provide structure, we need to provide instruction, we need to have set rules, we need to help them socialize. And then the personal part of parenting is caring and loving and respecting and having fun and having some friendship and socializing with our kids. So they're both important. I think sometimes what happens is we lean too much on one side and not the other. So if we don't have a balance, it could be all business. And so, we're all about rules and setting limits, and our kids don't have a personal relationship with us, so that they're less likely to want to listen or be guided by the parent. But on the other hand, we can have too much of a personal relationship. Okay. And then in that way, they don't listen to us setting rules, or they don't take us as seriously. And so it's really about, trying to have both, and having a dose of each is very important.
So how do we know when we're being too demanding or too unreasonable? How do we know when we need to back off? And I know you're talking about the calm parent, but oftentimes, we are so committed to the outcome we want to see, to the choice we want our child to make. and
Right.
yet we put our foot down and and we want to do it in a firm way, but how do we know when we are being overbearing or too much?
Too much. I think it's we always have to, observe ourselves. And observe ourselves means what's going on, what got me triggered just now. We can blame our kids, they trigger me so much, but actually they're a trigger, but they're triggering something that's already in us. So what's getting triggered in me?
Mhm.
What's the position or role I am in that I feel that I am responsible for everything again? Or what is it that, makes it that I
Mhm.
have to make sure this happens? So looking at ourselves and listening to your child, if they're saying, or behaving in a way that suggests that there's too much demand or too much, it's not reasonable. Listen, take it seriously, stay interested, stay curious, um, consider what they're saying rather than get defensive or push back. And, usually our children are mirrors of something. And so if we watch them, we can see
Mhm.
something in ourselves. But, an example I can take is, you know, brushing one's teeth. I don't know. That's always
Okay.
right. Um, and, you know, let's say the child's not brushing or, and the parent is getting very upset that they're not brushing their teeth. So now what happens is the parent is on their back about brushing their teeth. Sometimes that'll work, but a lot of times they're going to get a natural reaction back because most people, I don't care what age, have a reaction to being controlled, right? So in their own way, they're going to rebel in some way or another, might be passively, but if there's going to be a rebellion,
Mhm.
or they may comply, but either way, they're not necessarily from those interactions over time going to become independent and self-directed people that are thinking for themselves, which is most of what we want for our kids, right? Except when they're not doing it with us. So when it comes to brushing teeth, I believe that most humans are built for, helping themselves thrive. And
Mhm.
and so if let's just imagine a world where our anxiety didn't get in the way with our kids, they may just naturally do what they have to do. But as soon
Mhm.
as our anxiety gets caught, now suddenly it's between my child and myself about brushing teeth instead of my child and his responsibility about brushing his teeth. Does that make sense? So that we're suddenly getting in the middle of something that really doesn't belong to us. If we could leave it alone, which might look like this, and a lot of parents will say, "What, are you kidding me?" But if we're talking about how anxiety works and what happens in a family, if we can calm down and say to ourselves, most likely this child is somewhere going to learn to brush their teeth.
Mhm.
They're either going to feel horrible in their mouth, or somebody's going to tell them they have bad breath, or something's going to happen where they'll probably decide to brush their teeth. If they probably will do it anyway, if we just left it alone. And so what we can do is be a role model. Look, I want you to brush your teeth. I bought you all the toothpaste and toothbrush. I take you to dentist. I'm always going to do that. Okay. But
Mhm.
I'm not going to spend my energy on you. That is not going to work for anybody. So I'm going to go and brush my teeth, and I hope you'll take good care of yourself. Right.
Mhm.
And then sort of walk away. Okay. So that's sort of the calm, because it's the calm parent who recognizing what I can reasonably do and what is just not possible. I can lead a horse to water. I can't necessarily make him drink it. And
Right.
if I try to, we're probably going to have problems. Right? um, so thinking of that, in terms of, again,
Right.
going back to what I started with, if we know what we are reasonably responsible for, which is really what we have in our control.
Mhm.
I have the ability to show my child respect, help him learn skills, love him, care for him. But what I don't have control over, no matter how much of those things I do, is I don't have assurance that therefore he's going to come out happy, physically well, do well in school. Again, I can only do my part, and I can't be that focused on the outcome, because that outcome is not all in my hands. So if I really stay connected to, I'm going to focus on what's in my box, what's in my garden, and I'm not going to try to jump in and weed somebody else's garden, but I'm going to really put a lot of energy in what is mine as a parent. And I'm going to do that and let my child figure out something for himself. I think most of the problem I see in parenting these days, it might have been different years ago, is the tendency to overdo, to overfunction for our children. And remember, if we're overfunctioning, if a child already knows how to tie his shoes, but we continue to tie it for him, so to speak, then what we're inadvertently doing is creating an underfunctioner. Sometimes we say, why is my kid doesn't think for himself? He's not doing anything. I have to push him and motivate him and do all of this stuff. But take a look if this pattern of overfunctioning for my child is not because we want it to go like this, but is actually creating a bit of an underfunctioner.
Yeah.
And the only way out of that is to the overfunctioner to step back a little bit and tolerate the anxiety of doing that, so the child has a chance to step it up. And that's a process. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me pick some behaviors and maybe some worrisome behaviors that are, beyond this category of, let's say, hygiene or daily chores or just upkeep, et cetera. Like, let's say my child, what about a child who is dishonest? And, we feel like asking and just nagging at them, why don't you tell me the truth?
Right.
I want you to be honest with me. I mean, what else do we say?
Right.
And we wonder what's going on there. But how do we approach that? Do we walk away from that or
We do. I just, worked with somebody yesterday. It was the same question. She said, my daughter said that the test she took was, an open book. And so she took the test with her tutor. Okay. But in fact, she knew it wasn't, she was, and, we have to always decide, okay, so what will we do? We can certainly, it's always about conversation, not just immediate consequences and anger, which comes from a lot of reactivity. But again, it's kind of goes back to the same thing. Look at what's going on in the relationship. What is my child up against when they do tell me the truth about something that bothers me? How do I react to it? Okay, if I react in a very negative way, well, they're going to learn not to come to me or go through the back door. Most kids, especially once they hit adolescence, they want two things. They want to do what they want to do or fit in with their social group and not have disapproval from their parents. They want both, right? So we have to look at what, again, might be going on that might be contributing to this, and then hold them accountable. The father yesterday said, if it happens again, I will go right to the school and let them know that you cheated on the test, and that's that, and you'll deal with it. So I will take a stand. And you always want to ask yourself, what are my bottom lines? What will I live with? What will I not? And what do I plan to do about that? Okay. And then do it, right? With conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, we want to be, like all of us want to see our children perform and
Right. At their
perform
best.
in school. And, how about, the child who is just not getting their homework done?
Yeah.
How do we, how do we get out of that battle? Because it's so hard to step back and just let that happen. And how would you proceed there?
Right. Well, again, I think this is where we get very anxious because they're lying or they're not doing their homework. And that brings up tremendous fear in us. And then, what do we then tend to do? It's going back to some of what we talked about. What do we then do? Are we on their case? Are we trying to cajole them? And are we nagging them? And are we on their back? Because if we are, most likely we're going to just get in a power struggle more than anything else. So it's really defining yourself as a parent. This is what I expect you to do, whether it's brushing your teeth or lying or not lying or homework. Is that homework is between you and the school. Okay. I'm not getting in between that relationship. Okay. I will hold you accountable because I'm holding you accountable to doing your responsibilities. And that is part of your responsibility. There are no privileges without responsibility. Okay, so don't expect that you're going to have me drive you to the mall or whatever tomorrow, but that is, what I will do when you don't do. Or if you don't get your homework done, I will have you, there's no weekend plans until that gets done. You can decide where you will hold the line and then make sure you hold it, right? Even if they're pushing back on it or upset about it or whatever comes with that. But again, at the end of the day, you can't make anybody do anything. You can only decide what you will do in response to them not doing what they need to do. And then a kid, you can give them consequences from now to doomsday, but the consequence itself is not going to move somebody to do something until that child decides it's actually worth it to me to do what I have to do so I don't lose whatever I'm losing through that consequence, right?
I'm going to turn to another, continue with some parent questions here. This one just came in. How do you deal with a 7-year-old saying worst day ever when asked to do a task?
Gonna laugh, right? Well, so you can, I don't know if one is upset by that comment, but we can always get curious. I think curiosity goes a long way. Oh, sweet, you can empathize, or you can do some active listening. Sounds like that was really tough to hear that. What's going on? That does not mean they don't have to do it. All right. But you can just hear them and listen to their feelings, their experience, and have some empathy and some interest and curiosity. Maybe through listening, you'll decide, maybe that's not necessary. But most of the time, they're just trying to get out of something. And you still can hold the line while listening and loving them, right? And hearing, right? So
here's a scenario we come across quite frequently. Well, I would just say quite frequently. I should say every year it happens.
Yeah.
But this is the matter of the child not wanting to get out of the car at carpool, or maybe they didn't want to get out of bed in the morning, and they put up that big resistance. Or if they do get out of the car, they get into the hallway and they just put themselves down and pout and don't want to move to the classroom. How do we approach that?
You're talking about the parent who has to
like a parent. Of course, it'll help us here at school to know as well how maybe we can help a child who just is not ready to get started.
Right. If it's a one-off situation, okay, that's different than if it's happening all the time. You're going to approach it differently, obviously, right? But otherwise, it's their resistance, and depending on the age, at a young age, you can pick them up and put them in the car, and we're going. And at older age, it's a conversation and discussion, but it's holding the line. I think a lot of times we're afraid to hold our own line. We're trying to get them to do something that we want them to do, rather than staying calm about it and interested and curious, but saying, look, the bottom line is you need to get up. And if you don't get up, okay, you're draining. Well, I wouldn't say you're draining me unless you're all over them, but that makes it more difficult for me. I need to get to work. I need to do this. And we're going to make a plan. Okay, because I don't want that. I don't want to be held up by that. It's complicated in terms of these morning routines. A parent has to get to work. So I think they have to be creative about how they're going to solve this. Are they going to, at its best, if the parent is home, I'm not going to drive you. I'm going to have to drive you. And so that means either I put you in the car or you go half dressed, but, do that once and they'll learn from it. But that there's no ands, ifs, or buts. And in other times, I think we can, say, look, I can only do so much. We'll have a neighbor take them, or whatever the situation. It depends on the situation.
Sure.
Bottom line, I think always looking more at what's going on and why is this happening? And that may not be something the child can tell you, but it may be something you want to observe. If it's happening all the time. And is there something at school that happened? Is there bullying going on? Is there whatever situation might be? But again,
no, go ahead.
You react to it too quickly, because these things get us pretty stirred up.
Okay.
they're our children and we care. And so what that immediate reaction, that knee-jerk reaction, usually isn't the best one. So if parents can commit to whatever comes up, I'm going to pause and calm myself down, take a walk, go into another room, go to the bath, do something to get my adrenaline down and to be able to get to my best thinking. Because when we get stirred up, we're flooded. We cannot think. And once you do think, then you have a better idea of what to do. And all these situations are individual. They depend on the person situation. So it's not easy. I say parenting is not for the faint of heart. It's really a hard job.
Well, here's another sort of enraging situation, and let's say my 8th grade daughter doesn't get invited to the class party.
Yeah.
And now how we could respond, because this is a very hurtful situation, and we can't help but feel terrible for our daughter who is being excluded.
Yeah. Well, always being empathetic with that child to understand the pain, not to say, oh, don't worry about it, or it's no big deal, or any of that. Really step in their shoes, not to try to get rid of their feelings so they don't feel badly. The way that you're going to help them is to really, really try to step in their shoes and understand what they're going through and the pain. And so initially it's really just hearing them and listening and holding them, loving them. And, later on, if this happens all the time, then you may want to look at, what might else be going on, what might be going on with them socially, talk to the teachers, talk to the school. Is this going on all over the place?
Sure.
Sometimes, cliques just get built in and it's hard to break in. So I'm sure you go through this all the time at your.
Absolutely. I mean, I wonder if you can explain the difference between punishments and consequences.
Good question. I think punishment, people may see them as the same, but punishment is often more of, I am going to punish you because I want you to think like me and act the way I think you should. So it's really comes more out of a controlling, I am mad at you for making the decision you made. Okay. Consequences are most often natural. We can try to make them as natural as we can, but consequences help us guide our children to how life works. That's how I like to think about it. So if my child makes a poor decision, rather than getting mad at them for making a poor decision, because we might get upset by it or triggered by it or anxious about them making a poor decision, we don't have to be mad that they made a poor decision. Okay. We can, understand that our children will make poor decisions. They will not always make the decisions we want them to be. They're not 52 years old, they're whatever age they are. And so they will make poor decisions. And then we can guide them, we can talk to them about it, and then guide them with consequences. That when you do that, that doesn't work. And this is why. This is why I want to help you see how life works. Punishment, it's more that, you didn't live in my circle of truth, the way I think you should behave. And so I'm going to punish you for it. Now, I don't know if there's a big distinction. Sometimes it's just the wording, but I think just to watch when we're punishing, what's the intention behind it? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Are we so angry that, you can't have the phone for 10 weeks? That doesn't seem, that seems like a reactive response. Is it thoughtful? Are we thinking, not just kind of having a knee-jerk reaction from what is usually driven by our own anxiety? And I think, I think that's probably how much we, and you probably will get some feedback from your kids, because if they're feeling punished, they're probably going to react in pretty negative ways.
Can you talk about this matter of just separation, in the family. I know, the family is a unit.
Yes,
We are just inextricably tied.
yes,
But in your literature and what you have worked on, you actually talk about the importance of understanding where
yes.
separation comes in. And I think, wait a minute, isn't that a hurtful thing, or a heartbreaking element of this? Where does separation come in, and how can that be a matter an aspect that contributes to good parenting or good responsible development in our children?
Right. Well, if we start from the start, I mean, we all start symbiotically tied, right? That's how we come out, right? And the job of a parent is actually, there's a lot out there about attachment and all of that, but we start attached. The job actually is the hardest job of all, because as a parent, we have to start to let go of our children. Okay. Little by little, we are letting go of our child. And so that's the beginning of separation. And some families, and you have to look at your own history and your own families, there's two biological needs. I won't get heavily into this, but there's two biological needs that we all have, all humans. And that is the need for togetherness. Okay, that's why we have families. That's why we herd together when we're anxious. But we have the need for togetherness, and we have the need for individuality, for autonomy. Okay, we have both those needs. Some families are very anxious, and if there's too much autonomy, they get anxious and they want to pull their child back in. Okay, you're going to be too different from what I'm comfortable with. Okay, you're going to separate too much from me. Okay, so they don't let their child separate. And then there's other families where there's a lot of autonomy and not so much togetherness. So we're always, in any relationship, looking to the balance of both, that we have some individuality and we have some togetherness. But separation is the necessary thing. We often say a child's having trouble separating, but I really think that it's actually a child can't separate if a parent can't let go. And the way sometimes parents can't let go is they're too worried about it. They don't feel like the child can stand on their own 2 feet. They're just coming from their own anxiety and not giving that person the chance to fall down and learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. So separation is important. It's not hurtful. But if there's too much intensity in the togetherness, if there's too much intensity in a family, if we're all over each other and it's too much, some resolution of that, not a good one, but is that a child separates by pulling away. I can't stand this. So now they separate, and now they've withdrawn or they've distanced from the family. I've worked with an awful lot of people who were very overbearing with their children at a young age. And now later, their adult child, has completely distanced from them. Okay, they're not quite estranged, but some of them are. Okay, because they couldn't manage the intensity, and the only way they knew how to manage it was to go forward. So we want to make sure that separation's important, but we also want to give some freedom in that togetherness.
That's right. I wonder, to bring this interview with you to a close. Here's what's on my mind now. If I guess my question is it ever too late to become the parent that you're talking about? Let's say that we have our children are now, let's say, in middle school, and it seems like the tone in the household and my tone as a parent has been very dominantly nagging. And I thought, wow, I understand this idea, what you're saying, being calm, but I didn't pull off parenting that way. Have I already lost my opportunities? Is there a way to kind of make a shift? And
Absolutely.
how do we make that shift? How can we begin to make that shift to a calm parent?
First of all, it is never too late. I mean, we have the window up until they're 18 and they're off on their. We have a window of time. So far from too late. No way. However, sometimes parents make the change and it takes a while for the child to trust it or to believe it. So, you have to sort of hang in there as you're changing and you feel like your child is not respecting that I'm changing, or they're still assuming the worst of me. Just give it time, and just keep staying consistent with your change. And to become, a calm parent is all the stuff we're talking about. It's a real commitment to oneself to say, it is easy. It's really easy when we're stressed to go to give into our fear. And when we give into our fear, we lose it. We lose ourselves. It is hard. That's why I say it's growth, when we can learn how to tolerate and hang in there and actually not just respond from our reaction of the moment, but to our best thinking as to what we know is going to go better. And we have to commit ourselves that we're really going to do that. And that means, a commitment to pausing, to taking some time, to breathing, to saying to yourself, I'm not going to respond to anything right away until I get myself into a place where I can think and then talk. All of those things that we're talking about can happen, but you have to sort of make a decision. It's very hard to get out of just, our emotions are strong, okay, and they're powerful, and we have to manage those in order to get to our better thinking. I wish there was a magic pill or some magic wand, but I think we just have to do the work, and it pays off. And if we look ahead, okay, this is going to pay off. So now I have motivation to do what's hard. We don't want to do what's hard if there's no gain here. And just think there is no growth, I think, without pain. And so the pain is holding on to ourselves, not being reactive, and trying something new. And when we don't get discouraged, if it doesn't work right away, we have reasonable expectations for oneself. Take your time, try it again and again and again, because that's what it takes. And by the way, none of us will ever do this perfectly. If we can just do a little tiny bit better, it actually makes a big difference. So don't try for perfection, or don't try for a big leap. That's my suggestion. I struggle. I do this myself. I have 3 kids. They're fine, but it's hard. And I work at it all the time. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Debbie, I just want to say thank you very, very much on behalf of all of us here in the Levine school community. It's been a real treat to have you on board with us and to speak so wonderfully about an approach to parenting that is, we kind of probably know it's really the right thing in our hearts, but it's tough to be there. But you've given us some good encouragement and some strategies to think about how to move forward and to take that step and to be committed to it. And to think about our children as individuals and the responsibility we know we want them to develop and grow.